The Hoods by Harry Gray. Chapter 1. Cockeye Jaime leaned excitedly across his desk. His blue eyes were completely out of focus. His manner was insistent and earnest. His tone was obsequious. "Hey, Max! Oh, hey, Max! Listen, will you, Max?" he pleaded. Big Maxie darted a glance at our teacher, old safety pin Mons, sitting sternly at her desk far up front, at the head of our 7th grade class. He put his paper-bound Western on his lap and looked disgustedly at Cockeye. His eyes were sharp and direct, his manner calm and authoritative. His tone was disdainful. "Why don't you just read your book and shut up?" He picked up his Western and muttered, "Pain in the ass." At that rebuke, Cockeye gave Maxie a hurt and reproachful look. He slouched back in his seat, sulking, feeling abused. Maxie eyed him good-humoredly over the top of his book. Resigned, he whispered, "All right, Cockeye, what's on your mind?" Cockeye hesitated. His excitement had cooled somewhat from Max's chiding. He could tell because his eyes were back to normal focus. "I don't know, I was just thinking," he said. "Thinking? About what?" Max was getting impatient. "How about we skip school and go out west and join up with Jesse James and his gang?" Big Maxie gave Cockeye a look of deep disgust. Slowly he untangled his long legs from under the small desk. He stretched his long muscular arms leisurely far above his head, yawned and nudged me with his knee. In wise guy fashion he spoke through the corner of his mouth. "Hey, Noodles, did you hear the dumb clock?" "I ask you. How can one guy be so dumb?" "Go ahead, you talk to him." "Jesus, what a schmuck." "He's a schmuck with earlaps," I agreed. I leaned over to Cockeye with my habitual sneer of superiority and said, "Why don't you use your noodle? Them guys are dead, long ago." "Dead?" Cockeye repeated, crestfallen. "Yeah, dead, you clock," I sneered. He smirked. "You know everything. You got some noodle on your shoulders. Hey, Noodles." He gave me a sycophantic laugh. I ate up his flattery. He put it on thicker. "You're smart. That's why they call you Noodles, hey, Noodles?" He laughed again in the same phoning manner. I shrugged in false modesty and turned to Max. "What else can you expect from a pussy like Cockeye?" "Expect what about Cockeye, Noodles?" Tough-looking Patsy asked. He sat on the other side of Max. Miss Mons shot a warning, angry glance in our direction. We ignored her. Patsy brushed his black, abundant hair away from his blushy eyebrows with a defiant push. He effected a snarl by curling the corner of his upper lip, making his most commonplace utterance a challenge. In a deliberate, pugnacious staccato he asked, "What did the stupid clock say this time?" Pudgy little Dominic, closest to Cockeye, volunteered the information. In his high-pitched voice he said, "He wants to go out west and join the Jesse James mob. He wants to ride a horsey." Dominic bounced up and down, holding an imaginary rein with one hand. With the other, he bet his fat flank. Jidip, Cockeye," he taunted. He made a clicking noise with his tongue. The four of us joined the act, clicking and bouncing up and down together. Cockeye smirked in embarrassment. "Now, fellas, cut it out. I was only kidding." "Psst, the old battle axe," Patsy whispered. Like a dark cloud traveling swiftly across a bright sky, an enormous billowy disheveled figure came down to ale. Her gargantuan hips were covered with a multitude of black skirts fastened with safety pins. She stood looming over us. You good-for-nothing young tramps, what are you up to?" Miss Mons was bursting with rage. With a quick sweep of her hand, she snatched the Western thriller out of Cockeye's hands. Her cheeks blew with gale-like fury. You hoodlums! You gangsters! You East Side bums reading such trash! Give me that filthy literature immediately!" She stuck her hand under Max's nose. Slowly, impudently, Maxie folded the Western and put it in his back pocket. "Give me that book instantly!" She stamped her foot savagely. Maxie smiled sweetly up at her. "Kiss me in tauchas, dear teacher," he said in distinct Yiddish. I could see by her shocked expression she understood what part of the anatomy Max wanted her to kiss. For a split second the class sat in shocked silence. The only sound in the room was the laboring asthmatic noise from the crimson jowls of our teacher. Then a chorus of suppressed giggling broke loose. She whirled around, spluttering and wheezing. For a moment she glared angrily around the room in a furious silence. Then she retreated to a desk, her prodigious backside bouncing in angry rhyme. Dominic slapped his left hand on the middle of his stiffly extended right arm, an obscene Italian gesture. "Go latte, old safety pins," he shouted after her. Patsy whacked Dominic on the back and chuckled. "Yours is too small. You need a broomstick for that one." Maxie made a jeering, vulgar noise through the side of his mouth. The whole class broke into a hilarious roar. Miss Mons stood in front of her desk, surveying the rowdy scene. She was shaking in uncontrolled fury. After a moment she regained her composure. Her passion subsided into a quiet, icy bitterness. She cleared her throat. The class became still. "You 5 hoodlums who started this abominable disturbance will get your just deserts," she said. "All through the past term I've had to put up with your filthy, vulgar East Side conduct. Never in my entire teaching career have I come across such vicious young gangsters. Now, I am mistaken." A triumphant smile played on her lips. "Years back I had some miserable scalawags of like character." Her self-satisfied smile broadened. "And I read in last night's paper all about the illustrious end of 2 of them. They were ruffians exactly like you." She pointed her finger dramatically at us. "I prophesy that you 5, in due time, will also complete your careers in the same manner as those 2 in the electric chair." She sat down smiling at us, nodding her head in happy anticipation. Patsy growled. "She means Lefty Lou and Dago Frank." Maxie spit through his teeth. "A couple of dumb clocks, them guys." He turned to me. "That Lefty Lou, was he really your uncle, Noodles?" I shook my head regretfully. I would have been proud to admit kinship. "No, he was just a friend of my Uncle Abrams, you know. The one his friends threw off the boat when they were diamond smuggling." Maxie nodded. Our teacher took a heavy brass watch out of the folds of her black skirt. "Thank goodness, only 15 more minutes before the dismissal bell." She sat looking at us with a half smile on her face, pleased, relishing the end she had prophesied for us. Maxie took his Weston out of his back pocket. With an insolent look at the teacher, he slouched down behind his desk. The rest of the class went back to work. I imitated Big Max's careless slouch and lolled deep down behind my desk to listen to the familiar clamor of New York's Lower East Side through the open window. I indulged in my favorite make-believe. The outside pandemonium was like a discordant operetta. The piercing police traffic whistle was the orchestra conductor's starting signal. The cloppity-clop of dray horses pulling squeaky, rumbling wagons over cobblestones was the steady rhythmic beat of the drum. The blare of truck and passenger car horns were the wind instruments playing up and down the scale. The thin whimpering of hungry or ailing infants was the sad music of the violins, and the distant low rumble of the elevated trains was the palpitating beat of the bass viol. The medley of voices calling and shouting in a profusion of dialects was the background chorus, and the stentorian sing-song of the peddler calling his wares, the male lead. Finally, dominating this musical uproar was the ear-splitting screech of a fat woman. I fitted her in as the soprano voice, the prima donna. She was leaning out of an upper window. "Shloimi! Shloimi! Yoo-hoo! Shloimi! Shloimi! Don't forget, tell the grocer a nice fat schmaltz herring." Then I imagined goblins and witches riding on these waves of sound, and on the different stinks floating in. They flew in on the stink of rotting garbage from open cans, on the stink from sewers mingled with the sharp cooking smells from the dank tenements, and the acrid urine from the school toilet in the play yard. They came through the window in suffocating waves, particularly offensive goblins discharging fetid secretions. Forever after, these sounds and smells of the streets of the East Side were branded in my memory. I came back to reality after a few moments. I looked around at Big Maxie, Patsy, Dominic, and Cockeye Jaime, wondering what they were thinking. I visualized all of us on horses, 6 shooters in our hands, banging away at a pursuing posse. That would be fun, I thought. I laughed to myself. Me, Noodles, having kid ideas. In another few months I will be bar mitzvah, and I still have these dumb clock thoughts like Cockeye Jaime. I laughed to myself. What's funny, Noodles? Max put his book away and looked at me. Nothing, just thinking. Max chuckled. You too? About what? I don't know. About Cockeye joining the Jesse James gang. Yeah, pretty dumb, that Cockeye. We join up with them. Them small town guys. Maxie gave a scornful grunt. Not that Jesse James wasn't pretty hot with a 6-shooter, but you know what I mean, Noodles. Using horses on a heist. That small town old-style crap. When we get started, we'll show them. Maxie wiped his nose with the back of his hand. We'll make $1 million taking up banks, and then quit. Dominic asked, $1 million for the 5 of us, Max? Nah, $1 million apiece. How'd you like $1 million, Noodles? Maxie was very serious. $1 million? Yeah, I'd like it. But maybe $500,000 is enough, and we quit. $1 million is a lot of bucks, Maxie, I said sententiously. Maybe $500,000 is a lot of bucks for some guys, but for me, it's gonna be $1 million. Max looked defiant. I shrugged my shoulders. Yeah, all right. So I'll go out for $1 million. What the hell's the difference now? We're gonna quit when we get $1 million? Patsy challenged. Yep, we'll quit and move up to the Bronx and be big shots. Max's tone was final. Hey, fellas, Cockeye leaned over. How much is $1 million? Maxie slapped his head in disgust. I didn't like that question. The guy is past 13, and he asks how much is $1 million. Dominic cut in. Cockeye, you're a real clock. $1 million is $1 million. Yeah, that's right. Cockeye smiled agreeably. But how much is it? You tell me, dummy. How many thousands? Dominic scratched his head. I think $1 million is $10,000. What are you talking about? It's more than 50,000, ain't it, Noodles? Patsy jeered. I was proud. I knew all the answers. That's why they called me Noodles. I said importantly, it's $100,000. Pat smiled sheepishly. Yeah, I was just gonna say that. To hide his embarrassment, he quickly changed the subject. When we're gonna start collecting wood for the election fire, Max? Maxie gave it judicious thought. We start collecting this Sunday. Cockeye was excited. We're gonna have a big fire this year, like always. Even if Wilson loses? Yep. Don't we always have the biggest in the neighborhood? We don't care who is elected, Wilson or Hughes. We'll have a big fire just the same. The dismissal bell rang. We grabbed our books. The rest of the pupils stood respectfully to one side as we made for the door. Miss Mon stood up. She put her hand out to stop me as I passed. You, she said imperiously. Who, me? I was ready to push her aside. Maxie edged up beside me, ready to help. Yes, you, young man. Mr. O'Brien wants to talk to you. The principal? Again, I said in dismay. What for? None of your impertinent questions, young man. You just march upstairs. I turned to Maxie. Wait for me. I'll run up and see what the old clock wants. Max walked with me to the stairway. We'll be outside if you need any help, he said. Holleran will come up and throw the old bum out the window. Nah, he's all right. He ain't such a bad guy, this O'Brien. Yeah, for a principal he ain't too bad, Max agreed. He walked outside. I waited until he was out of sight. I didn't want him to see me take my cap off. I knocked timidly on the door. A pleasant bass voice said, "Come in, please." I stood politely at the open doorway. "Did you want to see me, Mr. O'Brien?" I said. Yes, come in." His large red face smiled a welcome. "Come in and shut the door. Have a chair, young man. I'll be through with this in a moment." "I was looking through some of your test papers. They're very good, very good." He looked at me. He frowned. "But your application for work papers is a disappointment to me." He went back to his inspection. I sat opposite him, fidgeting uncomfortably. He pushed his chair away from his desk and tilted his chair, rocking back and forth with his hands behind his head. His understanding blue eyes twinkled. He just looked at me. He took his time about talking. I began to feel uncomfortable. Then suddenly he stopped rocking and leaned across his desk. A grim expression spread over his face. "Sometimes I wonder why I take an interest in you," he said. "I guess it's because I see possibilities in you. According to your school reports, you are an exceptionally intelligent boy. I thought I would talk to you." He stood up and began pacing the floor. "Now, don't take this as another lecture. It isn't. You haven't many more months of school here, so your behavior, one way or another, isn't too important to us. But," he raised a finger dramatically, "your conduct from here on is very important to you, and to you alone. This moment may be a turning point in your life. I repeat, if you weren't an intelligent boy, I wouldn't waste my time with you. I wouldn't try to make you understand the road you and your companions are following, the road that leads to no good. Believe me." He said it with excited earnestness. I sat thinking, let the old man talk himself out. What does he know about boys? An old guy like him. Yeah, he's at least 45 with one foot in the grave. He's a pretty good Irishman, though. And for a principal, he's the best we ever had in this dump. Not like that lost old bastard, always hitting. The principal continued. "Your environment is partly to blame. Do you understand what I mean by environment?" For a moment I forgot myself. "Do I know what environment means?" I sneered. He laughed. "I forgot you're the one they call Noodles. You know everything." Crestfallen, I changed my manner. I mumbled. "Environment, you mean the East Side?" "Well, yes and no. Mostly no. Many, very many successful and good people have been born and brought up in this neighborhood." He stopped and looked intently at me for a moment. "The last scrap you and your friends were in, what was the real reason for it? Why did you boys do it?" I shrugged. "Do you know what I'm referring to?" I shook my head. I was lying. My face was burning. How did he know about it? "You know what I'm referring to." His voice sharpened. "Look here, young man. Let's be frank with each other." He continued his pacing. I felt like a prisoner being cross-examined. "I'm talking about Schwartz Candy Store, the one you and your friends broke into a few days ago." I wanted to sink through the floor. So he knew. So the hell with him. "Don't you realize that if it wasn't for your rabbi and the priest of your Catholic friends, and a little help from me with the authorities, you boys would have been sent to an institution of correction?" I shrugged. "That's what he thinks, the clock. He don't know who scared the rap for us. I wonder if I should tell him it was Big Max's uncle, the undertaker, who squared it. He went to Monk, the gangster, and Monk went to the Tammany district leader, and he's the guy who gave the judge his orders, before the rabbi, the priest, or O'Brien ever spoke to him. Dumb clocks. All of them. Monk and the district leader, there's two guys to keep in with. They are everybody's boss. Police, judges, everybody." "I'm talking to you, young man. Why don't you answer?" I shrugged my shoulders. I couldn't look him in the face. He continued pacing up and down. "I ask you, why did you do it? For the mischief? The money? Tell me, boy, do you get any spending money, an allowance from your parents?" "Sometimes, when my father works," I muttered. "Is he working now?" I shook my head. "How many times have I told you it's important to shake your head or shrug your shoulders? Speak up. Don't give answers with bodily movements. They're getting to be a ridiculous habit with you." I shrugged my shoulders. He threw up his hands in despair. "Oh, well, there is another thing I'd like to know." He hesitated for a moment. "All term I've been curious. Mind you, I'm not prying into your personal affairs. I just want to know for my future guidance why it is you and your companions don't take advantage of the hot free lunches provided for in the school. Instead, I've noticed you boys play basketball in the yard every day at lunchtime. You're pretty slim, and I imagine you could do with hot soup at midday." His tone was kindly and hesitant. "Tell me, is it because it isn't what you call kosher?" I shook my head. "Nah, it don't mean a thing to me, kosher." "Why, then? I'm interested to know." I didn't answer. I shrugged my shoulders. "This city is going to quite a bit of expense and bother to provide these free lunches," he continued. And a lot of you children who should take advantage of the city's generosity do not. Generosity, I sneered. Yes, generosity, he repeated. What's wrong with the lunch? Soup, I said derisively. Soup? Yeah, charity soup, I muttered. Yes, unfortunately, it doesn't seem that soup and bread is the main dish to be supplied free of charge to supplement the home diet of you undernourished children in these overcrowded areas. Soup schools, I said contemptuously. He smiled sadly. Yes, I've heard that before. Soup schools. Well, let's forget soup for the moment, shall we? I nodded. All right. Where were we? He asked, smiling. Oh, yes. Your father is one of the unfortunate unemployed. I nodded. He shook his head sadly. With his tongue he made a sympathetic tsk. I began feeling uncomfortable. He sighed deeply. That's why you put in your application for working papers? And why you aren't going to finish public school? You want to go to work and make money to help your family? Yeah. It's very commendable, but wouldn't you rather continue school? I shrugged my shoulders. Well, yes or no? I shrugged again. Look, I want to help you. I can help you if you change your ways. Keep away from your troublesome companions. Continue going to school. Only by learning. I cut him off. I can't finish school. I gotta go to work. My father ain't working. I blurted it out defiantly, all in one breath. How long has your father been out of work? How long? About 3 months. O'Brien rubbed his chin. Well, I have an idea, and I'll do it in your case. You're intelligent and fundamentally all right. He hesitated. As an afterthought, he added, I think with proper guidance, you can still develop into a good and successful citizen. I'll have a social agency look into your case and help your family, so that you can continue your schooling. Keep away from bad companions. A confident smile broke over his face. He thought he'd solved the problem. His voice was joyful. Well, isn't that a good thing? They will help you to help yourself. You will continue your studies, and by behaving yourself you can succeed. You want your share of success in life, don't you? To acquire your share of the world's goods you have to specialize. I see you are pretty good in mathematics. Why not continue and try to be a bookkeeper, possibly an accountant? Don't just go floundering through life without a definite goal. Specialized knowledge is like a sharp knife. It will help you cut your way through the entanglements of life to your goal, to success. You understand what I mean? Yeah, I knew what I meant, but I played dumb. Yeah, I'll get myself a big knife, I said. He blew his top for the first time. Damn your stupidity, he exploded. I thought you knew what I was talking about. I shrugged. I was getting annoyed. Well, his voice was agitated. What? I made out I didn't understand. He stared at me. I lowered my eyes. Then he knew that I understood what he meant. Yeah, I knew what he meant. He wanted me to continue school, break away from Max and miss out on the $1 million we're gonna make on heists and everything. I'm gonna get help from a social agency? Everybody will look down on us. Charity. What good is education? I had enough of what I wanted to do. I can write, I know arithmetic, I can read, I'm smart, I use my noodle. Yeah, that's why people call me Noodles, because I'm smart. Yeah, and I'll get me a real sharp knife. That'll be my knife of specialized knowledge. O'Brien stood in front of me, a stern expression on his face. I'll get the social agency to help your family, and you continue school, he said. His tone was definite. I stood up. I felt heroic, like Nathan Hale. I don't want or need your charity. I'm quitting school. He was a pretty good guy. I felt sorry for him. He seemed so sad for me, for all of us kids. All right. That's all, son. He patted me on the back. I walked towards the door. I turned and said, Well, will I get my working papers? He didn't answer. He just looked at me and sighed hopelessly. I was insistent. I want them, Mr. O'Brien, I said. He nodded sadly. You will have them. My friends were waiting downstairs. What did the old clock want? Maxie asked. Nothing much. He was talking to himself mostly. He wanted me to continue school. Cockeye took his harmonica out. We walked down the street harmonizing "Goodbye My Coney Island Baby." Maxie had a pretty good baritone. Patsy had a so-so bass voice. Dommy sang in a high falsetto. His voice was changing. And I sang what I thought was tenor. Anyway, we were pretty proud of our street corner quartet. We sung down the street in step with the music. Suddenly we stopped and gawked. There was the biggest man in the world. He was bigger in our eyes than George Washington was to most school kids. He was looking right at us. "Hello, kids," he said. We stopped and all. Maxie was always the nerviest one. He answered, "Hello, Monk." It was Monk, the toughest man on the East Side, and as far as we were concerned, in the world. "I want you kids to do me a favor," Monk said. "Anything you say, Monk," Max said. "Okay, follow me." He gestured with his hand. We would have followed our hero to hell if we had given the word. He led us into a saloon on Ludlow Street, where 10 husky pug uglies were sitting around guzzling beer. Monk laughed and said to them, "How do you like my new gang?" They looked at us and smiled. "Tough-looking gang. All right, Monk." "How about some beer, kids?" one of them said. It was the first time we had drunk the stuff. It tasted awful, but we drained our glasses, feeling a little dizzy and important. Monk Eastman explained what he wanted us for. We were given 2 baseball bats apiece and told to meet him and his gang in Jackson Street Park. A gang of Irish hoodlums had made a habit of swooping down on the park and of annoying the old Jews who congregated there. This time the Irish were in for a surprise. Monk had gathered together the ace man from every neighborhood on the East Side for this event. It was an all-star gang, as all-star as a baseball team made up of the star players from both leagues. Besides Monk, there was Kid Dropper Polly, A.B. Cabbagehead, Big Louie, Crazy Easy. All big-name guys. If Monk and his men were to carry the bats through the streets and into the park, it would be a dead giveaway to the cops and to the Irish mob. That was the reason we were invited along. Monk and his men filed into the park one by one, pretending not to know one another. They sat on benches with the older members of their religion, took Jewish newspapers out of their pockets, and buried their heads deep in the paper so they wouldn't be recognized. We stood a little distance away, ready with the bats. We didn't have long to wait. From the riverside of the park we saw the Irish coming, about 15 tough-looking dog wallopers. Immediately the meek and religious Jews left the park. A.B. Cabbagehead was closest to the advancing mob. A.B. was famous for his large head, which wasn't soft like a cabbage. It was as hard as a rock. The biggest of the Irish gang walked over to A.B. and growled, "23 Skeeto Sheeny! Out of the park, you goddamn monkey!" A.B. rose slowly from the bench as though he was about to retreat. Then, with his head lowered, he charged in like a bull. We didn't wait for any signal from Monk. We ran in with the bats. Monk and his men jumped off their benches. Each grabbed a bat from us, and the slaughter began. We stood watching with the rocks in our hands. If an Irish hand came into view, the 5 of us would conk him. We were having a hell of a good time. That's where we first laid eyes on Pipey, Jake the Gunniff, and Goo-Goo. Maxie was the first one to notice something queer. 3 kids about our own age were jumping in and out of the thickest part of the fighting. Max said to me, "Watch the 2 Jew kids and that Irish kid. They're working together. They're up to something sure enough." They would be in the middle of one fighting group, then they would break away and dive into another. I said, "They aren't fighting. What are they up to?" Maxie shrugged his shoulders. The clanging pie wagon finally came along, the cops in their high stiff helmets swinging their clubs. Everybody who could ran. Maxie and I grabbed a bat apiece. Maxie shouted for the rest to follow, and we started chasing the 2 young Jews and the young Irish kid. We cornered them by the East River. The young Irish kid was all out of breath, but smiling. In a brogue, he said, "Didn't we have enough fighting? Let's be friends." He stuck his hand out, introducing himself. "My friends call me Pipey, and these are my 2 pals, Jackie and Goo-Goo." Jake stuck his hand out, smiling, and said in a marked Jewish accent, "Pleased to meet up with you, boy cheeks." Maxie lifted his bat ready to swing and said, "Can this friendship crap? Noodles go through their pockets." I gave Patsy my bat. He held it ready to swing while Dominic and I went through their pockets. We were amazed at what their pockets held. There were 3 wallets and 4 watches with gold fobs among the 3 of them. We took the money out of the wallets, about $26, and Maxie handed Pipey, Jake, and Gugu $2 apiece. After considering a moment, he threw them each a buck more. Jake the Gonif was a tall kid. Pipey was short and stunted. Gugu was squat with enormous questioning pop eyes. They were so different in appearance, I thought them a peculiar combination. When I got to know them better, I saw that underneath they were alike. They were greenhorns from different countries, but with the same sly humor and instinct for thievery. Then we stood around listening to some of Piper's exploits. That was our mistake. Whitey the cop came running over. First he whacked Jake on the backside with his club. "You're the kids the men in the lockup described. Hand over those wallets and watches," he said. He went through our pockets. He took all our newfound possessions. "Go ahead, beat it before I lock you up," he said. Sullenly we walked away. "That goddamn Whitey," Maxie muttered bitterly. "He's a crook. I'll bet he don't turn that stuff back. He keeps it for himself." "What did you think?" I said sarcastically. "Don't you know everybody's a crook? Everybody's a legit." "Yep, you're right," Maxie said. "Sure, Noodles is right," Patsy agreed. "Everybody's a thief." We were outside the park. "Hope to see you fellows again," Piper grinned at us. He, Jake, and Gugu walked away in the direction of Broome Street. "Yeah, come around," I called to them. "We hang around in Jelly's candy store on Delancey Street." "Yeah, we'll be seeing you," Jake the Gonif called back. We walked down the street. We had already forgotten the unpleasant episode with Whitey. It was Friday afternoon. The sun, the streets, the people, everything seemed different on a Friday afternoon. We were happy and carefree. We had all eternity before us. 2 whole holidays. Wonderful days with no school. I was hungry, and tonight we ate the big meal of the week. The meal of the Sabbath. The only substantial meal of the week. No stale bread rubbed with garlic, washed down with tea tonight. Mama baked. And there is hot challah bread and gefilte fish and fresh horseradish for supper. My mouth was watering. I licked my lips in anticipatory pleasure. Boy, I was hungry. It seemed I wasn't the only one. Cockeye stopped playing his harmonica and said, "How about we go to Yoni Schimmel's niche bakery and get a couple?" Patsy said, "Who's got money?" "You got money?" "I got 1 cent that Whitey didn't take," Cockeye said. "Anybody else got money?" Maxie stuck his hand out for Cockeye's penny. Dominic took 2 cents out of his secret pocket. The rest of us were broke. "We'll buy 1 niche for 2 cents and a bag of hazy arbis for the other cent." After we'd bought the niche and the hot chickpeas, we stood on the street corner, and each had 1 bite of the niche and a few chickpeas. It tasted wonderful, but it made us hungrier. We walked through Orchard Street, where the pushcart peddlers were gathering up their wares to get home early for the Sabbath. They eyed us warily. They recognized us. After a few intricate maneuvers, Max and Patsy clipped an orange apiece. The peddler shouted curses after us as we ran. "Banditen! A brock zu euch!" As we shared the oranges, we strolled into Delancey Street, the street I lived in. "There's Peggy, the boumaquet," Cockeye stuttered excitedly. On my stoop, leaning languorously against the door, was blonde Peggy, the janitor's nymphomaniac daughter. "Hi, boys. Give me a piece of that orange, Noodles," she called out. "I'll give you a piece of my orange if you give me a piece of your—" Patsy didn't finish his sentence. He stood there smiling hopefully up at her. "Fresh boy." She was giggling, pleased with the idea. She waved him away. "Later, not now, 23 Skidoo. But not for an orange. Bring me a Charlotte Russe if you want me to give you a good one." I walked past Peggy, giving her a feel. "Oh, Noodle, stop it. Not here. Let's go under the staircase," she whispered. I was young. I said, "Not now. I'm hungry." Maxie shouted after me, "Meet us at Jelly's after supper, Noodles." "I'll be there," I shouted back. I ran up the 5 flights of creaky stairs into our dark railroad flat. It was full of nice baking smells. Supper ready, Mama? I yelled as I threw my books in a corner. It's you, my good boy, my shiny. Yes, Ma, I asked is supper ready. Yes, it's ready. But wait till Papa and your brother come home from school and I light the Shabbos candles. I'm hungry, Ma. Why do I have to wait for the Shabbos candles and Papa? Because if you was like Papa and your brother, you wouldn't be in trouble all the time. And maybe you wouldn't be so hungry all the time. And think of shul once in a while, maybe. Mama gave a deep sigh. I think of food and making money. A lot of money, Ma. $1 million. $1 million? You're so foolish, Sonny, believe me. For the millionaires is the $1 million. For the poor people is the shul. Now don't bother me, please. I have to finish the wash so we can all take baths in the washtub before we make Shabbos. And don't forget to remind me. I got to rinse your head with kerosene. Did Papa borrow any money for the rent, Ma? I could hear Mama sighing deeply from the kitchen. No, Sonny. I picked up a copy of Robin Hood that Maxie had loaned me and began reading it over again. I was a voracious reader. I would read anything I could get my hands on. I could still hear Mama vigorously rubbing cloths at the washtub. Gradually the light grew dim. It was difficult to read by it. I struck a match and climbed on a chair. I tried to turn the gas on, but no gas came out of the fixture. I called out, Ma, there is no gas. She sighed heavily. I used it all up for the bacon and the hot water for the wash. So give me a quarter for the meter, Ma. I'm sorry, son. Why, Ma? We'll have candles tonight. But I can't read by candles. I'm sorry, Sonny. The quarter I can't spare. I'll put it in tomorrow night. That way it will last for next week, maybe. I slammed the door and went out to the hall toilet used by all 6 of the families living on the same floor. It took me a full minute to get used to the stink. In a hidden niche above the water closet, I had a box of cigarette butts I had collected from the gutters. I smoked 3 butts to kill my appetite. I noticed there were no orange tissue papers hanging on the nail. No crap paper, I muttered. I made a mental note to gather some up on Attorney Street, where the fruit peddlers discarded them when they unwrapped their oranges. Or as second choice, to clip a telephone book out of Jelly's candy store. I heard footsteps coming my way. I waited hopefully. The toilet door opened. Yes, it was Fanny, who lived down the hall. She was my age. "Oh, it's you," was her pleased and startled exclamation. "Why don't you lock the door like you're supposed to?" She smiled coquettishly. I bowed mockingly. Come in," said the spider to the fly. She stood in the doorway smiling. "What for, you fresh thing? So you can fill me all over with your fresh hands?" She giggled. She put her hands on her wide hips and swayed back and forth. She smiled provocatively. Her tight, short dress revealed her plump, round breasts and her fat, full little figure. It got me all excited. I reached down through the top of her dress. I fondled her warm, smooth young breasts. Gently, I squeezed her nipples. She swayed with her eyes closed, breathing quickly. "Don't it make your titties feel good, Fanny?" I whispered. She opened her eyes. She smiled. "Titties are for babies, to give milk, not for boys to play with." "Come in," I whispered in anxious excitement, "so I can lock the door and play around good with you." I took her by the hand. She held back. "Go down to Jelly's and buy me a Charlotte Russe first." "Where did you learn that? From Peggy?" I grumbled. She giggled. "Well, will you buy me one? If you buy me 2, I'll let you play between my legs." Yeah, I panted. "I'll buy you a whole box full of Charlotte Russes." She giggled at the desperation in my voice. I grabbed her around her soft, large buttocks and pulled her in with me. I was about to lock the door. A deep bellow, like a cow calling its calf, resounded from the other end of the hole. "Fanny! Fanny! Hurry up with the turlet!" Fanny whispered, "That's my mama. We're going to my Tante Rivka's for supper. Better leave me go. I'll let you play with me some other time." I was reluctant to let her go. I was too excited. "Please let me go. I got to make a pee," she said. "If you don't, I'll pee in my bloomers." I let go of her. She picked her dress up, pulled her bloomers down, and sat down on the bowl. I walked out in disgust. I thought she was vulgar. I went downstairs, hoping to meet Peggy. I went down the cellar. I looked in every toilet on every floor. I looked on the roof. She was nowhere around. Disappointedly, I stood on the stoop watching the girls, making obscene remarks as they passed by. Big Maxie came hurriedly along. He waved to me. "Come on, Noodles." I ran down the stoop, falling into step beside him. "What's up, Max?" I asked. "Come on, we'll grab a ride with my uncle in the Peace Arrow." "The uncle picking up a stiff with the hears?" I asked delightedly. "Yep, up in Harlem, Madison Avenue. We give him a hand. He's got an unexpected job." We reached the parlors all out of breath, just in time to give his uncle, the undertaker, a hand carrying the long wicker basket out to the hears. Proudly we sat on the large front seat. Driving on Upper Fifth Avenue along the park, Max's uncle pointed out the palatial homes. Sarcastically he commented, "Just like down the east side. I'll bet they've barely got enough to eat in those houses." The remark reminded me of my chronic hunger. I whispered to Max, "Maybe we can promote your uncle for some hot dogs or something." Maxie nodded and winked. He nudged me. "Some day we'll be able to buy plenty of hot dogs." "It can't be too quick for me," I said. "You kids like a couple of hot dogs?" Max's uncle grinned. "Okay, I can take a hint after we pick the stiff up." Riding back to the east side after we had picked up the stiff, Max's uncle stopped at a hot dog wagon and bought us each 2 frankfurters. We leaned against the hears eating out hot dogs. Back in the hears, as a joke, he handed us cigars. To his surprise, we took them, lit up and puffed away. He chuckled in admiration. "You kids are okay." We helped them into the funeral parlor with the body. "Thanks, boys." Then he chuckled and corrected himself. "Thanks, man." He tossed us each a quarter. Maxie said, "Glad to have been a help to you, Uncle. Anytime you need us, let me know." He looked fondly at Max. "You're growing up to be a big boy." He patted him affectionately. "Thanks for the ride and everything," I said. "Not at all," he said. "So long, man." He smiled after us. We walked into Jelly's candy store, smoking the cigars, feeling like men of the world. Patsy, Dominic, and Cockeye were already there, waiting for us. Patsy called out, "Hey, big shots, where you been?" Maxie tossed his quarter on the counter and said, "Malteds and Charlotte Russers for everybody." Jelly's son, Fat Mo, was behind the counter, with a dirty apron around his large middle. He picked up and examined the quarter. Patsy snarled angrily, "What you looking at, Fat?" Fat Mo murmured apologetically, "Nothing, Pat, nothing." "Okay then, get busy on them malteds." We sat on the stools loudly sucking the whipped cream off our Charlotte Russe cakes. We watched the electric malted machines whirl. They were the newest sensation on the east side. Jake the Gunniff, Gugu, and Pipey, our newfound friends from Broome Street, sauntered in. We exchanged hellos. Jake said, "How would you guys like to hear a nice poem?" "A poem?" Maxie asked dubiously. "About what? What are you, a poet?" "Jake's always got poems and riddles," Pipey volunteered. "He makes them up himself." "Yeah, dirty ones," Gugu added. "Good, too." "Yeah, they are the only ones that are," I agreed. "Okay, let's hear one." Max appeared bored. We swung round on our stools, facing Jake. He took a stance before us. With a grin on his dirty face, he recited, "Said the good little girl to the bad little girl, 'Gee, it's hard to be good.' Said the bad little girl to the good little girl, 'It's gotta be hard to be good.'" He stopped. He looked at us for approval. "That's all?" Maxie asked. "Yeah, how did you like it?" Jake asked hopefully. "It stinks," Maxie said. Jake appeared crestfallen. Pipey suggested, "Try a riddle on them, Jake." Jake turned, a hopeful smile on his face. "Why is the East River like a girl's legs?" None of us knew the answer. "Because the higher up you get, the nicer it is." He smiled at us, trying to read approval in our expressionless faces. We gave them a sip each from our malteds. Piper spied the box of Charlotte Russers on the counter. The 3 hurried over to them. Fat Mo yelled over, "Hey, you guys, lay off! You guys got dough?" Piper produced a $1 bill. Jake the Gunniff took it out of his hands and waved it in the air. He called out to us, "You guys want some Charlotte Russers?" We took 2 apiece. Max asked, "Where did you guys get the buck?" Pipey rolled a lush on the Bowery. Jake proudly put his arm around Pipey's shoulders. Oh, he was a pushover, little Pipey said modestly. I took this off him too. Pipey produced a large knife. I remembered O'Brien's knife of specialized knowledge for success. This was some sort of omen. This knife was for me. I had to have it. It would give me magic power, I thought. Let's see it, Pip, I asked. He handed it to me. It was a spring push-button knife of German make. It made a fascinating click and the large shiny blade swished out. There was no question about it. I was going to keep it. I kept opening and closing it in front of Piper's nose. Alarmed, he kept backing up. Maxie was eyeing me. He said, You like it, Noodles? You gonna keep it? I said, Yeah, it's a bow. So keep it. It's yours. Ain't it, Peep? Maxie turned his saccharine smile from Peep to Jake to Goo-Goo. They understood that smile of Max's and my attitude meant bad business. Patsy bent his face down close to Pipey and snarled. Yeah, you're giving Noodles a present, ain't you, Peep? Dominic and Cockeye walked behind them, ready for action. I kept staring at Pipey and clicking the knife open and shut at his throat. The atmosphere was tense and very quiet in Jelly's candy store for a moment. Jake finally broke the tension with his good-natured laugh. Yeah, you can have it, Noodles. It's too big and dangerous for a little guy like Pipey anyhow, Jake said. I walked over to the shelves of paper-bound books, fondling and examining the blade. It was beautiful. It was sharp on both sides, and came to a strong needle point on the end. The blade itself was at least 6 inches long. A push of the button, and the blade clicked into the 6-inch handle. It made a formidable weapon. It fitted just right in my pants pocket. My eyes wandered to the tempting display of dime paper-bound books. To me it was a hypnotic display of Nick Carter's, Diamond Dick's, all sorts of westerns. I thumbed through Horatio Alger's From Rags to Riches, debating with myself whether to buy a book or use the quarter that Max's uncle had given me for the gas meter at home. I thought if I bought it, I wouldn't have any light to read by tonight in bed. Fat Mo came over to me and whispered, Go ahead, Noodles. Stick one in your pocket before my old man gets here. Don't bend it too much, but bring it back tomorrow, all right? I stuck From Rags to Riches in my pocket, feeling happy and grateful, and saying, I'll take care of it. Thanks, Mo. I'll bring it back in the morning. I felt as if life was complete. I had a quarter for the gas meter, a new knife, and a book to read tonight. All right, fellas. Maxie was taking his tie and jacket off. Let's get going. You guys want to come along? He turned to Jake, Peep, and Goo-Goo. What are you going to do? Jake asked. We're going to do a little long-distance running, Max answered. Nah, not for us, Jake said. We'll see some more. They walked out. We followed Max's example, putting our clothes on a chair. We jogged downtown into the night, starting on our daily long-distance run. Maxie in the lead set the pace. He was a Spartan when it came to exercise. When we grow up, it will come in handy. We'll have muscles and wind, and be tough as nails. We were jogging along in a compact group right behind Max's long flying legs. After 10 blocks, Pudgy Dominic, gasping and puffing, called out, I had enough, Max. I'm all pooped. Maxie turned his head. He was breathing easy. The trouble with you, dummy, is that you eat too much spaghetti. Someday you'll be sorry. Dominic dropped out. We continued downtown, changing pace, running fast one block, then slowing up the next. We made our way downtown to the financial district. We stopped and rested at the curb. An immense building was in front of us. The windows were covered with thick iron bars. The entrance was a heavy steel door. Patsy remarked, It looks like a prison. There's no prison down here, I said. Patsy said, How do you know? Maxie laughed. Don't argue with Noodles. He knows everything. Hell even admitted himself. Yeah, I smiled. I'm a smart fella. You mean a fart smeller, huh, Noodles? Maxie said. We all laughed at my expense. Maxie called out to a passerby, Hey, mister. The man stopped. Yes? What kind of building is that? A prison? The man smiled. A prison? No, that's where they keep all the money. Patsy interestedly asked, A lot of money? Why, yes, the man was amused. Quite a few million. That's the Federal Reserve. He walked away smiling. Maxie walked over and tried to look in. He came back and said, "Someday we're gonna heist this joint. What do you think, Noodles?" "It's okay with me, but it looks like a tough job," I said. "Yeah, it looks tough. How you gonna heist this joint?" Maxie replied, "Don't worry, I'll find out someday." I looked at Maxie. He was staring at the building. It reminded me of a cartoon I saw someplace of a mouse defying an elephant. He muttered, "For $1,000,000 I'll heist this joint someday." We ran all the way back to Jelly's candy store. Dominic was standing outside, talking to Fat Mo's pretty brunette sister, the untouchable Dolores. We all had a secret crush on her. She had a pair of dancing shoes slung over her left shoulder. She smiled coolly when she saw us approaching. Her greeting was only for Cockeye. "Hello, Hi," she said. "Do you mind playing for me tonight while I practice?" "Sure, Dolores, it's a pleasure." Cockeye was overcome with delight. Anytime for you, anytime," Cockeye repeated effusively. They adjourned to the back room of the store. We followed and watched as Dolores changed her shoes and went into her dance. She improvised a dance routine to Cockeye's playing. Her limb movements thrilled me. My eyes followed her every motion as she kicked and pirouetted easily, gracefully, around and around. She stopped after a while to catch her breath. She sat talking to Cockeye. Maxie called out to her, "Hey, Dolores!" She turned and stared coldly at him. "Hey is for horses. Who do you think you're talking to, Peggy? I'm not accustomed to being addressed in that manner." She turned her back to Max and continued her conversation with Cockeye. A tingle of delight went through me. That was the moment I felt my first deep pang of pride and overwhelming infatuation for Dolores. It was a clean, uplifting emotion, entirely different from the feeling which Peggy or other neighborhood girls inspired in me. Looking at her sitting daintily aloof on the chair, I felt she was like a dancing angel, something ethereal. Yeah, this was it. I loved Dolores. I smiled and walked over to Dolores. "What kind of dancing is that? What do they call it?" She looked haughtily over her shoulder. "I thought you knew everything. That was interpretive dancing. You're not as smart as you think you are." I stood there red-faced, at a loss for an answer. Cockeye volunteered. "Dolores is practicing to be a professional dancer. She's gonna be a star in a Broadway show someday." He tapped his harmonic on the palm of his hand. In a swift tempo he played, "Yes, sir, that's my baby." She floated around the room again in time to the music. Somehow her attentions to Cockeye didn't seem to bother me in the least. It was Maxie who aroused my jealousy. While she was dancing, Maxie mischievously picked up her shoes and threw them behind the bench. She stopped after that number, smiled at Cockeye and said, "Thanks very much, Hi. You played that harmonica beautifully." Cockeye blushed and mumbled something. She looked angrily around for her shoes. I walked behind the bench and picked them up and handed them to her. She misunderstood. She gave me a furious look. Without a word she put them on. I could have killed Max. She left the room, her green eyes flashing and her head held high. Unhappily, without a word, I walked outside. I stood in the doorway, feeling as if the world had crumbled around me. Dolores meant a lot to me, and Maxie had loused me up with her. A placating voice cut through my unhappy mood. "You want a sweet caporal, Noodles?" Maxie offered me a cigarette. I took his peace offering. We stood there smoking. Mr. Jelly came walking down the street. When he reached his doorway, he whispered, "You boys bring me some bundles in the morning." Maxie nodded and said, "Yep, don't we always supply you with morning papers?" He patted Maxie on the head. "Pick me up a bundle of Tuggerblots tomorrow, yeah?" Maxie said, "Yep." He nudged me. "We get up early tomorrow, Noodles." I nodded. "What time?" "About 4:30. I'll meet you on the corner." "I'll be there." We stood there, finding it difficult to make conversation. We blocked the doorway. A customer made for the door. We stood aside with deference for the well-dressed, mustachioed professor. We tingled with pride and pleasure when he greeted us with a pleasant smile. "How are you, boys?" Okay, Professor, Max said. Fine, Professor, I echoed. You boys wait for me. I'll be right out. Max said, Sure, Professor. We saw him enter the telephone booth. He's smart. He's got plenty of brains, that guy. Max was overflowing with admiration. He's only out of jail a week, and I'll bet he's back handling junk. He's a smart wop. I wonder where he gets the stuff, Max amused. He's got connections. He imports it, I guess. It don't grow in this country, I said importantly, in my know-it-all manner. From where do you think, Noodles? Italy? Could be. Maybe China. Chinks smoke it mostly. I read somewhere. Why do people smoke opium? It gives them nice dreams. Wet dreams. About goals? Max grinned. We both laughed. I said, I'd like to smoke a pipe of that stuff sometimes. Max said, Me too. That's what they call kicking the gong around. Noodles? I nodded and smiled affectedly. The professor came out puffing on a big cigar. I have a job for you boys. Follow me down to my place, he whispered. We walked behind him. He rounded the corner and went down a dark store cellar. He held the door open for us and bolted it after us. We followed him in the dark into a rare room. He struck a match and lit the gaslight. The professor had a complete workshop with assorted carpenter tools, hand drills, and a small mechanical punch press in the corner. I spied a small honing stone. I stuck it in my pocket when his back was turned. On a bench there was a large wooden box with the lid open. Inside I could see some gears and wheels. It had slots cut into the front and back, with handles on the sides. Max and I walked up close to the box. It was highly polished and looked out of place in that dirty cellar. The professor stood there looking at us, twirling his mustache. Max gestured with his head. What's that? That? The professor was amused. He closed the lid and said, Let me demonstrate my new invention, something every home should have. He turned the handle. We heard the gears inside revolve, and before our amazed eyes, a crisp $10 bill came out of the slot. He walked away and said, All right, let's forget all about this machine for a while. I want you lads for... He stopped. He stood looking at us, twirling his flowing mustache. You boys want to make some money, right? I said, Sure, Professor. That's what we're here for. He looked gravely at us. I know you lads are smart, and I can trust you to keep your mouths shut, right? We both echoed. Right. He smiled, showing his large, white teeth. Fine. You're good lads, just the type I can trust. I wouldn't ask anybody else because most young boys talk too much. Now, here's what I want you to do for me. You know where Mott Street is? Yep, Professor, Max answered proudly. Noodles knows this city like a book. Mott Street is in Chinatown, I said. That's right. He took a small round ball resembling putty out of a drawer. Keep this in your pocket. Deliver it to the store at this address. Just leave it on the table and walk out. That's all you do, right? He made us repeat the number of the store over and over again until we had memorized it. Be careful with it. It's valuable, and don't play with it. Maxie nodded. Yep, Professor. We know what's inside. The professor raised his eyebrows questioningly. Junk, I said. The professor chuckled. He patted me on the back. Smart boy. I'll wait here for you, and I'll have $1 apiece for you when you get back. When we reached Chinatown, we found the store easily. As we opened the door, a cop swinging his club passed us without giving us a second glance. The bell hanging over the door gave a faint, creepy tinkle as we walked in. In the murky light, we were barely able to distinguish a large, fat Chinese seated at a table. He was staring balefully at us. I was glad I had the knife in my pocket. It gave me a feeling of supreme confidence. I gave him back stare for stare. I toyed with the release button on the knife. In my imagination, I dug it into his fat throat again and again. Then I slashed him across the face. A funny thing happened. I actually saw his eyes bulge with fright. I swear he knew what I was thinking. I was sure of it. He knew that all I had to do was to take one step. With my magic push-button knife, I would cut his face into chop suey. He turned his white, flabby face away in terror. I laughed and spit on the floor. Max put the ball on the table. We walked out. "What was you laughing at, Noodles?" Max asked. "At the Chinaman. Them chinks don't like to be laughed at, Noodles." "That chink I could handle. Why anybody else?" I boasted. Maxie looked curiously at me. "He was a big chink." I shrugged. "So what? I'd cut him down to my size." Maxie laughed and patted me on the back. "Yeah, I forgot you got Pipey's knife." "My knife?" "Yep, your knife. It makes you feel good to have something like that handy, huh, Noodles?" I nodded. "Yeah, it makes you feel like you're somebody." "I'm going to get something to carry around myself," Maxie said. He picked up a cigar butt from the sidewalk. He put it in the corner of his mouth. "Someday I'm going to get me a revolver. I'll ask the professor." He handed me the butt. I smoked it a while, then passed it back to him. The professor held the door open for us as we walked downstairs into his place. "Everything all right? You boys delivered it?" he asked anxiously. "Yep, everything's all right. We delivered it." Max spit on the floor. He puffed on his cigar stub. I looked coldly at the professor. He laughed and gave us $1 apiece. "You kids will go a long way. You got the goods all right." "Yeah, Professor. We're looking to make money. We need it," I said. "You boys will make plenty, and I'll show you how." "You're the professor," Maxie wisecracked. He chuckled and rubbed his hands. Yes, I can teach you lads plenty of tricks, maybe for our mutual benefit." "Hey, Professor." Maxie was shuffling awkwardly with his feet. "Yes, Max?" "Can you get me and Noodles a couple of roads?" "Roads?" The professor was surprised. "Yeah, a couple of roads, revolvers." "Yes, Max, I know what you mean." He was twisting his mustache. He looked at us intently. "What do you need them for?" "Well, we thought it would come in handy sometime." "For instance, when and what for?" "To make a heist." "Who are you going to heist, Max?" Max hesitated for a moment. Then he said, "Well, of course, we've still got to case the joint." "Well, let's hear about it. Maybe I can give you lads a few pointers on how to go about it." "Who are you going to heist? Jelly's candy store?" "Now, we're going to heist the Federal Reserve Bank," Max said impressively. The professor turned his back and put a handkerchief to his mouth. At first it sounded as if he was laughing, but we were mistaken. He really was coughing violently. When he caught his breath, he apologized. He wiped his wet eyes. "I have a bad cough, this damned cellar, Now, about this Federal Reserve heist. You lads are a little too young yet. Wait a few years. After a little experience on small stuff like candy stores, drug stores, then gradually you work your way up to the Federal Reserve. All right, lads?" He was smiling broadly. "You can always come to me for help." "Can you get us revolvers?" Max was insistent. Yes, I can get anything. Leave it to me, Max. When I think you boys are ready for them, you will have them. Is that satisfactory? One thing you have to learn, not to be too impetuous, my lad." He patted Max on the back. "What's the name of the book you have in your back pocket?" he said to me. I took it out and showed it to him. He looked at it distastefully. He grunted. "From Rags to Riches. Isn't it juvenile for a boy your age?" I shrugged. "You like books?" he asked, smiling. "Yeah, I like to read." "Why don't you get good books? Join the public library." "The library is for sissies." He laughed. "Well, I'll tell you what. I'll let you belong to my library. Go on, help yourself. In there." He gestured toward the toilet. "You got books in there?" "Yeah, go on, help yourself. That's the best place for the library. That's where one can really concentrate on what one is reading." I walked into the toilet. Both walls from the floor to the ceiling were covered with shelves of books. They all had unfamiliar titles. The Education of Henry Adams, a book by a guy named Yeats, and others I had never heard of. "Well, have you found something you would like?" the professor called to me. I spied a title that made a little sense to me. Boswell's Life of Johnson. Yeah, I thought this must be pretty good. All about Jack Johnson, the champ. I walked out with it. The professor said, "What did you pick out?" I showed it to him. He looked doubtfully at me. Do you think you will like it and understand it? Who are you kidding? I snorted. It's kind of deep stuff for a kid, he said. You don't know Noodles, Professor. He's a smart guy. The smartest guy on Delancey Street. All right, Noodles, he said. After you finish it, I'd like to know what you think of it. Yeah, I'll let you know, I promised.